What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an opinion video really about Bloodlines 2 and its upcoming bit of information that is set to be released this September. For those unaware and who just clicked on this out of curiosity, I suppose, development on Bloodlines 2 recently broke its very long silence to announce that they will be sharing details of the rebooted game this September, which is supposed to include information on who has been developing the game after the previous developer was removed, on top of information about the release date, though obviously they did not go into specifics. It would seem that September will be some sort of showcase announcing the details of the revamped version of this title. And as the title of this video would have told you, I think they need to nail this, because confidence in this project is very low. And I say that as somebody who loves Vampire the Masquerade and the World of Darkness at large. So much so that I'm familiar with most everything else that they've released in the world of video games, and I don't think it's unfair to say that most of that, even the stuff that has been received well, has been fairly middling, with a substantial portion of it being visual novels or other niche projects like VR games, which means that even the stuff that has done well is still overshadowed by Bloodlines, which is a game from 2004. To give a few examples here, we have the recent Swan Song, which puts you in the shoes of 3 different vampires of different age and tells a pretty great story. However, it's also still ultimately just a narrative adventure that they're charging almost $50 for, that the game just is not worth. Then we have other games like Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood, which is in a similar situation. This one's a little more action-packed, mind you, but still a pretty bare-bones experience that they're charging $50 for. Or at least they were. Now you can get it for like 30, but that's besides the point. Then I would say even more recently, we have the cancellation of their Battle Royale game, Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt. And believe it or not, I've played Blood Hunt, and as a Battle Royale game, it is pretty good. The thing is, though, a Battle Royale game set in a world where the emphasis is on storytelling and RPG elements doesn't make a lot of sense. And while the game itself was, again, genuinely pretty good, there just wasn't enough of an audience for it to be sustainable. And all of those situations individually are whatever things happen, but taken collectively, the World of Darkness offering for video games is frankly underwhelming. And I think that's a real shame because it is one of my favorite universes in fantasy, and I think there is a ton of untapped potential there for the video games. Though, for those who are just completely unaware, it is technically a TTRPG game, which is sort of their main thing, and in that regard they're still doing pretty well. Exactly how well is actually a little difficult to quantify, as World of Darkness is made up of several different TTRPGs technically, with Vampire the Masquerade being the largest one. And this means that basically any World of Darkness game that was not simply a small visual novel has not really done all that well. And that's no disrespect to the visual novels, I actually love a few of them myself. Shadows of New York is my favorite. This, however, does not ultimately inspire confidence when it comes to Bloodlines 2. And given the cult classic that Bloodlines is, that was already going to be a difficult thing to pull off. And then you add on top of that all of these varied and widespread development troubles, that makes for an even more difficult needle to thread. Because given all of those problems, a lot of people are going to look at Bloodlines 2 regardless of how well it is showcased or appears to be, with a lot of skepticism, and they will simply wait for reviews or general opinions to come in about it. And because of that hesitance, let's call it, I think in order for Bloodlines 2 to be successful, it needs to be really, really good, which is ultimately true of many games. But in this particular case, we have an uphill battle against public perception of a very rough project, on top of a background in ultimately a lot of underwhelming video game titles. So with that in mind, a few things I would like to see here in September is mostly just gameplay and an updated look at the title itself, because we need as much information as possible here to really sell people on the idea of it. I also think whoever the developer turns out to be will have a big part to play in that as well, as ultimately the studio working on the project is currently unnamed, and this is supposedly being revealed in September along with everything else. And I think the reputation of said developer will also bear a lot of weight here, which makes, in my opinion, their decision to keep this developer under wraps until such time as it was prudent to release that information was probably the right move given everything else going on. But things like who's developing this game, what the gameplay actually looks like, is it a project that genuinely looks compelling in some way, but also how much it has to offer versus whatever the actual scope of it is, because how large this game is going to wind up being or what the story even is at this point is really hard stuff for us to answer. So I think a showcase focused on the gameplay specifically, what the scope of said game is, and some sort of hook to really draw people in is a way to make that showcase actually work for them. Because right now I think a lot of people have written this off. I see comments about people who thought it was just outright canceled plenty of times. But in spite of all of that, I sincerely want Bloodlines 2 to succeed because it's a universe that I'm really fond of, and the games for it are so few and far between that a good RPG set in that universe would be a breath of fresh air. However, given all of the things we've covered up to this point, I do at the same time think it would be naive to assume everything will be sunshine and rainbows, but in spite of the uphill battle, I really do hope it pans out well and we have an interesting game to talk about, because I will be covering it one way or the other. It's a title I'm very interested in. I want to see how this plays out and whether or not they can actually release a good game, or if this IP is seemingly cursed when it comes to decent video games. But I think that just about does it for me. I'd love to get your opinion on this, so feel free to comment down below, which of course means like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.